decent frame rate. And that this actually does show you if you're a game maker, producer, marketer, publisher, porter, whatever, you could, if you look for a platform of choice to run games at a very decent performance, standard, you might as well go for Linux, not for any of the other platforms, because it just works pretty well with probably the NVIDIA binary driver, which is kind of notorious for all sorts of reasons. But I don't play games too much. I think you are the one reviewing lots of games and getting lots of front pages and sites and stuff, because you do review them pretty well. Not many people actually review games for.
I mean, like I say, I see it as a way in to introduce people to Linux. It's another barrier that you can break down. And like I say, when people do actually play these games, they do see the quality of them. And one of the interesting things I found, I've done over the years a lot of emulation of various different platforms, and the one thing I found is in every single example, the Linux, as long as you have a like-for-like version with Linux, native Linux emulator, but in every single example, Linux emulates far faster in terms of frame rate, etc., sound emulation, syncing of the sounds to the code execution is so much better in Linux than it is in Windows, and that's talking about N64 emulation. The one that sticks mostly in my mind is Amiga. I do a lot of Amiga emulation, and the frame rates that I can achieve through Linux are far faster than anything I've ever been able to achieve through a like-for-like.
What about features? Because the last time I was spending a fair bit of time testing the emulators in Linux was around 2004. I still have programs I got from SourceForge to emulate some ROMs, and what I found, that's in 2004, so of course things have changed since then. One of the emulators, I think for Mega Drive, did not have a GUI, so I'd have to run the program by using the command line, running the emulators with the one of the arguments would be the ROM that I want to open and run. And that was not as good as some of the emulators available at the time for Windows. As far as user friendliness is concerned, I couldn't quite get people to use Linux and to say, oh, well, it's got, you can play some games on it. You just have to open the command line and do something.
We've got beyond. I mean, it's beyond that now. I mean, obviously the command line is there as an option should you wish to emulate without a GUI. But I mean, you've got things like the main GUI now, which covers, I believe, there's quite a few main GUIs, and a lot of them cover multiple platforms. Every single new emulator. I've been recently running a Nintendo DS emulator to play some of the homebrew and demo scene titles that have been made, which again works flawlessly, as much as an emulator for a touchscreen device can on a mouse-driven PC. But yeah, it's changed very much now since 2004. There is every package which I use that could be EUAE, all have a GUI. Exactly the same as a Windows or presumably Mac emulator.
Maybe sometime in the future we will have some interesting emulators, because the next PlayStation, it's supposed to be kind of a handheld thing. It's not really the mainstream, the mainline PlayStation series. But they have I'm not sure if it's partly a phone or just something like the DS, but it's going to be based on Android, which is Linux, essentially. And it's interesting, of course, because Sony was trying to push out Linux from the PlayStation 3, which kind of it's still pretty much doing that. But here you have Sony actually picking Linux and choosing it as the underlying platform for a gaming console, with using the same brand as the PlayStation 3. And this isn't the only one, of course. You have Pandora, and you have the G2 GPX, something like that. Can't remember what it's called, but it's related to the Pandora console. And I don't think people play with I think that the main threat now to the handheld consoles, things like the Game Boy and DS, are just the phones now. And I think that's one of the reasons they realized that this is doing to the gaming devices, the very special purpose, very dedicated gaming devices. The phones can do more And people did the same thing to what was used to be the PDA. So you don't really find any PDAs in the shops anymore, which is unfortunate to me because I like PDAs. I don't really want to use it a lot.
I mean, I think you're right. I think it is very much where people want one device in their pocket, and if they're going to have one device in their pocket, it needs to be a phone at the very least. And you've got your Android phones taken over where your traditional handheld consoles maybe had a home. I mean, that's why we see Nintendo have got the 3D NDS. Now, I'm not sure whether that's been released yet because I don't particularly follow Nintendo products that closely. But that's certainly a new take on the handheld console. So presumably that's trying to appeal to a bit of a new market, a 3D handheld device. I don't know if it requires glasses or how it works, but I remember seeing that. But what I would comment on is very strange, the sort of affair that the PS3 had with Linux, because again, it's one of those titles that I really just observed from the periphery with the PS3. I don't particularly have any great interest in any one console. But it seemed that one time it was fine, then it wasn't. And I believe I read recently, in the last few days, are they not... there was a distribution of Linux for the PS3 that's not being developed anymore because it was too much hard work. I can remember reading that, so I don't know if you...
Yeah, I did cover it as well. I'm not sure if it's... I know that Ubuntu used to have a port for the... in this case, you're talking about not the power. It's the cell, yeah? I think it's the cell. So Ubuntu, I think, pulled the support, and I think the one you might be thinking about is Yellow Dog. Linux, which was passed to, and that used to be the company called Terrasoft, and Terrasoft was bought by a company whose name I can't remember right now. So it's been passing around quite a bit. You had I know the person who used to do the distro, and it was called after an actual dog, and it's a long story. And it was based on Fedora. As far as I can tell, Fedora 6, Fedora 7 at the time. This was the main kind of recommended distribution for the PlayStation 3 if you wanted to install that. As far as I know, they no longer do any marketing around that. They don't actually... nobody really provides a PlayStation 3 distribution if you cannot install that, because the firmware is basically overridden the holes that allow you to install the other OS. So unless you have a very old PlayStation and you manage to avoid getting the updates to the system, then you probably couldn't do much with as far as hacking is concerned. It actually reminds me, we spoke about Chrome OS the previous show, and also the show before. A person called what's his name, Danny. His username is TEKK in Identica. He wrote to me to just clarify, quite importantly, in fact, that you do have the choice. You could take the Chrome OS laptops, and you could pull some kind of a switch somewhere behind or below the unit to go into what's called like developer mode or something of that sort. And you could basically do just about anything with the laptop, but it will lead to data loss because of the way it's built in terms of hardware or trying to secure the system. So you could basically take the system and just kind of flush it and put things on it if you're interested. And it probably could work just fine. And that's quite an important thing to remind you that even though Google is trying to sell you this piece of hardware that mostly connects to Google services, it doesn't force you to use it in this way. It's not really a new kind of counter-revolutionary thing where they take away rights from you and say, well, you have to use this system on this laptop, nothing else will work. So that was good.
Well, keeping on topic for that, with Chrome OS, it's over the last few days I've been playing with my Acer Aspire 1, which originally had Windows XP. Now, without boring everybody with the long version of the story behind why I had that, what basically happened a couple of years back, I was going on holiday, and I bought myself a pay-as-you-go dongle with O2, I believe it was, and I bought myself a Linux netbook and plugged in this dongle, and it was the one thing that I couldn't get to work. It ran on sort of it had built-in software that partly installed onto the hard disk, which ran like a metering system, which monitored how much time you're online and how how much of your download limit you were using, and of course that didn't work with Linux, and there was all sorts of conflicts. Anyway, obviously times moved on since then. That's not the case anymore. But I had this Windows XP netbook that I took on holiday, and apart from being hideously slow, about 3-4 minute boot up time and about a 2.5-3 minute shutdown time, I still had